ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Eisenhower Hall. The United States Military Academy's West Point Band thanks you for joining us in celebrating our nation's veterans and their selfless service to the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure at this time to introduce to you the 59th Superintendent of the United States Military Academy, Lieutenant General Robert L. Caslen.
Well, thank you very much, Sergeant. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, and welcome to West Point. It really is a distinct honor to have you all here today. It's also a distinct honor to pay tribute to our veterans, both those who currently serve and those who have served in the past. I think you're really going to be in for a treat here with this concert that's coming up. I saw a little preview of it, and it's just phenomenal and fantastic. As the Sergeant said, I'm General Bob Caslen, the Superintendent of West Point. It's an honor to have you, and what I'd like to do is just take a minute to introduce some of our honored guests that we have here this afternoon. First, just a couple of them, and then we'll give them an applause of welcome. First, the Honorable Bill Larkin and his wife Patricia, the New York Senator from the 39th District. We also have the Honorable Donna Benson and her husband Jack from Orange County Clerk. We have Mr. J.B. Miller, from the CEO of Empire Entertainment. Miss Ann Fitzgibbon from Harmony Programs, which is an urban city music organization, and I would also like to include our brand new Command Sergeant Major from the United States Military Academy, Command Sergeant Major Del Byers, and his wife Katia. Would you please join me in a warm welcome for our honored guests? You know, over the many years, music has played a key part of our military presence, from the fife and drum corps of the Revolutionary War to today's West Point Band. This band that you're about to hear is the oldest band in the United States Army, formed in 1817. They perform here. They are. Not only do they perform here, they performed around all the communities of the New York City area and across the nation. They're going down to New York City tomorrow morning to lead the Veterans Day Parade down Fifth Avenue in New York, along with the Chief of Staff of the Army, General Odierno. But throughout generations at home and abroad, it was those who served in uniform and their families, as well as the civilians that supported them, who have really sacrificed to protect that powerful promise that we hold so dear: life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. It's about our veterans this weekend. Our veterans are comprised of neighbors and friends and relatives who have answered America's call to serve during a time of war. They are volunteers, all of them, and our country has placed the security of our nation on their backs again and again. But they never waver or question. They quietly have stood among the generations of Americans that had gone before them, willing to accept the mission at hand and to defend the values of our nation and our very way of life. I'm proud also to work with the current generation of cadets, the next generation of veterans here at West Point, who have stepped forward to serve our nation after the towers fell and during an uncertain time, and with great resolve and dedication and talent, just as those who have served before them. We are also fortunate to serve in a nation that so long after the battle's end and long after the heroes have come home, our nation continues its sacred obligation to honor these men and women. So today we express our gratitude to all our veterans from all our wars for your commitment to a lifetime of service to your country. So in honor of our veterans of today and our veterans of tomorrow, the West Point Band has put on a phenomenal concert today for your enjoyment. So welcome, please relax, and enjoy a great concert from West Point's own, the West Point Band. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, please rise for the playing of the national anthem and the presentation of colors of the United States of America by the Cadet Honor Guard from the United States Military Academy, Corps of Cadets.
as we got off the boat in Busan, they handed us a weapon and ammunition. And I succeeded in embarrassing myself because as the train was was moving from Busan to the front area, some guy opened up with a machine gun from a hillside at the train, and I ducked down in the floor, and all the GIs laughed at me. Most of them were guys coming back who had been wounded and been in battle before. That's the last time I ever ducked when somebody was shooting, unless everybody was covered.
And we get out of the vehicle and platoon sergeant's like, all right, ma'am, you know, second platoon's in this tent. And I was like, okay, awesome. Where are the females sleeping? And he's like, ma'am, second platoon's in this tent. And I was like, Roger, I got it. You guys will all be here, and I'll be with the female. And he's like, ma'am, I don't know what you're used to, but we're all sleeping together. And he's like, you'll be sleeping next to me. I got you covered. Like, don't worry, man.
So then we go in, land on the beach and moving towards the houses and that there, and they start firing at us. And I hit the ground and ding, you know. I said, what in the hell are you doing here? Is what I said to myself. You didn't have to be here. You lied about your age. You know, what are you doing here? And so it's suddenly I woke up. What I'm doing here is I'm the platoon sergeant, and those guys are waiting to see what I'm going to do.
Where do we find a hero? Someone to save the day? Where are all the champions who protect the things we made? If we look a little closer, it won't be hard to see. There's a young man or a woman standing guard for you and me. That solitary soldier keeping watch on through the night, guided by the light of ancients who did so much more than fight. For the ones who gave it all and the lessons that were learned, for the best who fought in hell and all the times they came back burned, over mountains and through deserts, those places far away, standing for freedom together for the USA. But no matter what their creed, they rose up for the call. They fight for their ideals, yes, they fight for one and all. Give me liberty or death became their battle cry. And through the generations we see their flames still burning bright. It's true that war is hell, but when we look into their eyes, we see the flame of freedom, and that fire never dies. For the ones who gave it all and the lessons that were learned, for the best who fought in hell and all the times they came back burned, over mountains and through deserts, those places far away, standing for freedom together for the USA. For the ones who gave it all and the lessons that were learned, for the best who fought in hell and all the times they came back burned, over mountains and through deserts, those places far away, standing for freedom together for the USA. For the USA. USA.
Good afternoon once again, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sergeant First Class Jason Ham, and on behalf of Lieutenant Colonel Jim Keene, the commander and conductor of the famed West Point Band, it is our distinct honor and privilege to join you here on this famed stage on this very special day. Veterans Day. You know, on your calendar, it reads as November 11th, but in reality, every day is Veterans Day. As long as you and I live in these United States, someone has paid for the freedom that we enjoy right now with their service or their very life. Officially, though, each November 11th, on Veterans Day, our nation takes a day to formally stop, to remember, and to say thanks to those who are serving or have served in our military. Tomorrow morning, in fact, on Veterans Day, like it has done for decades, members of this organization will have the privilege to join the nation's largest Veterans Day parade as it leads that parade down Fifth Avenue in New York City. There, we will join literally thousands of others to recognize and to honor the contributions of those who have served our great nation in our military. In the same manner, we can think of no better way to start our presentation today than to ask those of you in our audience who have served our nation and our veterans to please stand and be recognized. Ladies and gentlemen, how about a hand for all of our veterans joining us today? Thank you so much. You may be seated. Well, as the Revolutionary War continued to rage on in 1781, the man who would become the nation's first commander-in-chief had already seen the value that veterans gave to our nation. As he said then, "The willingness with which our young people are likely to serve in any way shall be directly proportional to how they perceive the veterans of earlier wars were treated and appreciated by their nation." In 1775, the Continental Congress created the Continental Army, and it named General George Washington its commander. In a very unlikely series of events, a new army, along with state militia forces and the French Army and Navy, defeated the very powerful British in 1781. The new Constitution in 1789 officially made the President the Commander-in-Chief, and it gave the Congress the authority to levy taxes and to make new laws. But few then could have predicted or even imagined that such a great nation would grow from these very humble beginnings. The United States Constitution remains today one of the nation's most cherished symbols of liberty. Even today, those who swear an oath to serve America in the military dedicate their allegiance to this document. And as the Constitution so beautifully and profoundly states, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, we celebrate all of those who have served from 1776 until this very day. The spirit of independence that drove the American Revolution is the same spirit that continues to drive our nation today. As increasing restrictions were placed upon the colonies by the British, colonists began to take matters into their own hands, marching with the Minutemen to the spirited sounds of the fife at Lexington and Concord. At Bunker Hill, fifers and drummers played Yankee Doodle for the very first time in battle. After the surrender at Yorktown, the new nation was born, and the first battle fought by the young military was a victory against overwhelming odds. You know, despite the hero status to which we elevate some of these very early historical figures, they really were just men and women like you and me, thrust into a position of responsibility, standing up for their beliefs, and ultimately fighting to break the chains of tyranny. In 1814, a Washington, D.C. based lawyer by the name of Francis Scott Key, went to the British fleet and succeeded in securing the release of a physician being held prisoner. But because of the planned attack on Fort McHenry in Baltimore, both men were detained. So during the nights of September 13th and 14th, 1814, Key watched the bombardment of Baltimore from the deck of a British ship. When Key noticed that the American flag was still flying over Fort McHenry at daybreak on September the 15th, he was moved to draft the words of a poem. So scribbled on an envelope, Key titled his poem, "The Defense of Fort McHenry." The published version of the poem would eventually include instructions that it be sung to the 18th century melody "To Anacreon in Heaven," a popular song of the day, and a tune Key had in mind when he had penned his poem. We, of course, know this tune as our very own Star-Spangled Banner. You know, this year, our nation continues to recognize the 150th anniversary of what is perhaps the most pivotal event in American history. That, of course, is the Civil War. It all began with a tiny island in the middle of Charleston Harbor in South Carolina. On April the 12th, 1861, at 4:30 a.m., Confederate batteries opened fire on Fort Sumter, seeking to retake it from the United States Army. This began an artillery duel that lasted for 34 straight hours. At midday, on April 13th, a white flag of surrender was raised and the garrison evacuated the fort on the 14th. The next day, President Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers to help put down the rebellion. Up on the hills near Manassas, Virginia, thinking that the separation between North and South would be a peaceful affair, spectators spread blankets and poured their wine into glasses, preparing to watch what they thought would be nothing more than a mere skirmish between Union and Confederate soldiers. Instead, they looked on in horror at the Battle of Bull Run as it raged before them, Americans killing one another. That peaceful separation they thought they would witness would blow up into the worst conflict in the history of the United States, and it would claim more American lives than the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, and both world wars combined. Well, during the Revolutionary War, the fife and the drum had dictated the daily routine. Those various calls told the soldiers what to do, both in battle and in the camp. But during the Civil War, the bugle replaced the fife when it came to communicating both on the Union and the Confederate battlefields. To eliminate confusion, it was in the Civil War that bugle calls were standardized. The directional sound of the bugle, as the troops discovered, were very effective in carrying orders quickly in battle. For all intents and purposes, this really was the first mass communication device. One that I may point out to you is still in service today. The bugle announced the start of the day with reveille. Of course, how can we forget this famous call, the one that commanded the cavalry to make its way into battle? Charge! Makes you want to root for the offense or defense, right? Well, last post signaled the end of the day when the duty officer returned from the tour of the camp and quarters. The name is derived from the practice of inspecting all the sentry posts around such a camp at the end of the day and playing a call at each of them. With the help of some of our other Hellcat buglers, this is last post. But of all the bugle calls, one in particular has stood out as representing the voice of an appreciative nation while solemnly allowing loved ones the chance to say goodbye. Buried here at West Point is Union General Daniel Butterfield, the man who developed this bugle call into what we know today as taps. It is a piece of music that conveys the very highest of honors. Today's military buglers provide that honor at more than 15,000 military funeral requests and memorials each year. At this time, if you are able, please rise as we pay tribute with the bugle call taps to our brothers and sisters who have passed and who served faithfully before us. Thank you. You may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, how about a round of applause for Staff Sergeant Chris Venditti and all of our Hellcat buglers. Well, after the Civil War, our nation began the healing process. Industrialization took over, and the nation expanded westward. The military band actually came to define the music of this era, producing a man who may actually still, to this day, be the most famous American musician, a man who can be argued was our first truly international celebrity. A veteran of both the Marine Corps and the United States Navy, he would eventually come to be known as America's March King. His name, John Philip Sousa. Well, you know, up until this point, America's military conflicts had in some way revolved around border disputes. The Revolutionary War had given us a border. The War of 1812 had reunited it, had defended it actually. The Mexican-American War in the mid-1800s had pushed it westward, and the Civil War had reunited it. Through all of these conflicts, our veterans were redefining what it actually meant to serve a nation. But today's commonplace idea of defending America's interests abroad was really something that the nation hadn't given very much thought to. In 1915, however, all of this changed. On May 1st, the ocean liner Lusitania left Pier 54 in New York Harbor, bound for Liverpool, England, carrying 1,959 people. 5 days later, she was sunk by a German U-boat with only 764 people surviving in those waters. Understandably, the American public was furious. Yet in spite of the public outrage, the United States would not enter the Great War for another 2 years. And during that time, as diplomatic efforts continued to fail with the German government, it became increasingly evident that the United States would be drawn towards war with a coalition of forces that eventually would include dozens of nations, including the great powers of France, Italy, Japan, and our newfound ally, England.
And our next, we had a rest of 6 days or 7 days, and back we went again. And then came the greatest sensation, I call it, but it wasn't a sensation. Someone said to us excitedly, "Jack Smith." I said, "What about him?" I knew Jack Smith. "He's dead, he's been shot." The first one of the battalion to be shot. I said, "What?" "Yes, he's dead, been shot. He put his head too far over and a sniper got him." And that caused a bit of a sensation amongst the lads. They thought, well, this is not exactly what we come for kind of business. But later on, from that day onwards, when we went to the trenches, It was 3 kill, 4 kill, 5 kill, 20 kill, 100 kill. And then, by then, we was veterans. We knew all about the trenches and its risks and what we had to do and what we had to suffer, because after a week in the trenches, or a fortnight in the trenches, with when the winter came on with mud and water, you've got to put up with lice and rats. Rats was in the hundreds everywhere. If we was billeted when we came out to a French shed or something on the farm, you couldn't get a good sleep. We slept on the floor, no beds. You couldn't get a good sleep because the rats would nibble your ears.
On the evening of April 2nd, 1917, President Woodrow Wilson appeared before a joint session of Congress and asked for a declaration of war to, quote, make the world safe for democracy, end quote. On April 4th, Congress granted President Wilson's request, setting events in motion that would lead to drafting nearly 3 million men. By summer 1918, over 10,000 Americans were pouring into France every day, experiencing warfare that made use of technology available for the very first time in history. The typical age of a soldier during World War I, I should mention, was 25 years of age. And for the average sum of $50 a month, these young men answered the call of their nation and went overseas, living in muddy trenches and fighting bitter, bloody battles in the war to end all wars. When these men and women returned to America, the roar of World War I was replaced with the roar of the 1920s. Optimism led the way as our veterans returned home to their families and adjusted to a new way of life, all believing what President Wilson had said about World War I being the war to end all wars. But we know better. On December 7th, 1941, a day that will live in infamy, the United States was again plunged into global warfare when the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor sank more than half of the American fleet stationed in the Pacific. Men between the ages of 18 and 30 were drafted to fight in both the European and the Pacific theaters, with the normal term of enlistment being, quote, for the duration of hostilities, end quote. Quite literally, this meant until the end of the war.
Then I was waiting for my draft notice, and I got it, I think, either the end of June or July. Then you had to report for a physical exam. I remember, just a side note, that my mother and father said, try to get into the Navy. Try to get into the Navy. I remember when they interviewed me, they gave you an opportunity to say where you would want to go. I remember they sat in the desk about 20 feet ahead of me, major, a captain, I think a first lieutenant, sitting there. So, you want to tell us, sir, what's your preference? And I went on for about 3 minutes. I lied a little bit, to be honest with you, that my grandfather was in my blood, the Navy was in my blood, and they're all looking at me, never said a word. And this major in the beginning, in the middle, took one of those, you know, with the stamp, boom, A-R-M-Y. They never said a word to me, and I was in the Army.
Let's hear it for the West Point Band. Well, we would be remiss today if we did not take a moment. I believe we have a couple of World War II veterans with us. Can we get some house lights? If you're a World War II veteran, will you please stand? We have a few in the audience. How about a hand for our World War II veterans joining us here today? Thank you so much for joining us here at West Point.
When all the world is a hopeless jumble and the raindrops tumble all around, heaven opens a magic lane. When all the clouds darken up the skyway, there's a rainbow highway to be found, leading from your window pane to a place behind the sun, just a step beyond the rain, somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby, somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt away like lemon drops way above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me, somewhere over the rainbow. Bluebirds fly, birds fly over the rainbow. Why, oh, why can't I? If happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow, why, oh, why can't I?
Well, the troops returned home and the rationing ceased. And now that factories had learned the benefits of becoming a bit more efficient, American life really began to prosper in all areas. It was a time of celebration, and it was a time of growth. Some of those that had served in the war continued to remain in military service, while others turned in their combat boots for a new life in the private sector. Under the presidency of Harry S. Truman, the armed forces were fully integrated, and women found new levels of opportunity and leadership within it. The United States Air Force was created, and the departments of the Army and Navy were merged into what is now the Department of Defense. But on June 25th, 1950, North Korean forces invaded South Korea, and the Department of Defense was asked to support the United Nations effort there on the Korean Peninsula. The United States and other allied countries passed a Security Council resolution authorizing military intervention in Korea. American forces would provide nearly 90% of the 341,000 troops sent to Korea.
When I was told I was going to Korea, it was almost an excitement in my life. On December the 30th or 31st, we moved up to the front lines. And that's where dreams, imagination, and reality collided. Big crash, you know. I remember the cold, trying to get used to the cold. And I remember looking at some of these men that I was living with who had just finished a battle called the Iron Triangle. I looked at them and I knew what that battle was like, and you know, it was, my recollection is that they never talked about it. They just said they were there.
When they first arrived in July 1950, they found themselves in a hot and humid climate that showed them no mercy as they fought the enemy up one hill and then down another. A few months later, these same service members found themselves struggling to stay warm and fight off cold weather injuries in the sub-zero winter temperatures. You know, this past summer marked the 61st anniversary of the conclusion of the Korean War, and it recognizes the sacrifices of those who served there.
So this first mission, I'm looking ahead, and I can see where the target area is. You know, it's fairly clear, and the sky is turning black up there. You know, and I'm thinking, that's where we're going. We're going right up there where all that stuff is. You know, and so you just kind of okay. And all of a sudden, a guy out to my right, he burst into flames because a MiG-21 made a high-speed pass on him, a shot of missile, and all of a sudden, flames are coming out the back of this airplane. About 300 yards long, and you know, he dumps all his stuff and he's trying to make it back. They had to jump out. We drop our bombs and we're getting shot at, and we came back and we had the crew chief as we climbed out of the airplane. Sir, he says, you got some holes in this thing, you know. So we got holes in the wings and everything, and I looked around and said, you know, this is the first mission. This is going to be a long tour over here. You know, this is a real eye-opener.
In 1960, John F. Kennedy won the U.S. presidential election, And in his inaugural address, he made the very ambitious pledge to, quote, pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, in order to assure the survival and success of liberty, end quote. He recognized the unique capabilities and value of U.S. Army Special Forces, utilizing the Army's Green Berets in new ways and establishing the Navy SEALs. And as his administration continued, Vietnam would, of course, turn into a primary focus in his attempt to stop the spread of communism in Southeast Asia.
As we were coming over Vietnam, coming in, I had a guy that was on his second tour there. He was by the window, and I was in the middle seat. And he said to me, as we're coming over, we're flying over the top of Vietnam, you can look way out and you can see all the green foliage and everything like that. If you look real close, you can see some of the fighters just doing airstrikes. That's way in the distance. So he says to me, are you afraid? And I says, no. I says, because they're down there and I'm up here. My first, when I realized that where I was, when I looked, when that door opened up and the heat hit you, it was extremely hot. It was way over 110 degrees at that point.
Initially, the majority of troops serving in Vietnam were professional career military personnel who had volunteered for service. But as tensions escalated and more troops were needed, the United States found it necessary to begin a draft. So on December 1st, 1969, the Selective Service System of the United States was established, launching what would become one of the major issues of the Vietnam War. Thousands of men were drafted to serve their 12 months in country before deciding to extend or to return home to the United States.
There must be some kind of way out of hell, said the joker to the thief. There's too much confusion, I can't get no relief. Businessmen there drink my wine, plowman dig my earth. None will level on the line, nobody offered his word. Hey, no reason to get excited. The thief he kindly spoke. There are many here among us who feel that life is but a joke. But you and I, we've been through that, and this is not our fate. So let us not talk falsely now. The hour's getting late. Hey!
During Vietnam, it was estimated that approximately 11,000 military women were stationed there during that conflict. Nearly all of them were volunteers, with some 90% deciding to serve as military nurses. But women also served as physicians, air traffic controllers, intelligence officers, clerks, and other positions in the U.S. Women's Army Corps, the Army Medical Specialist Corps, the United States Navy, Air Force, and the Marines.
You better think about what you're trying to do to me. Yeah, think. Let your mind go, let yourself be free. Let's go back, let's go on way back when. I didn't even know you could have been too much more than 10. This time, I ain't no psychiatrist, I ain't no doctor with degrees. I don't need no much IQ to see what you're doing to me. You better think about what you're trying to do to me. Yeah, think. Let your mind go, let yourself be free. Oh, freedom. 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 Oh, freedom. 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 Yeah, freedom.
As a nation, we learned some important lessons from Vietnam. We learned that a war can be unpopular, and we learned that despite political or social reservations, there will always be men and women who will embody the spirit of our founding fathers and agree to serve in the armed forces on behalf of our great nation.
She walked to the mailbox on that bright summer's day, found a letter from her son in a war far away. He spoke of the weather and good friends that he made. Said, I've been thinking about Dad and the life that he had. That's why I'm here today. And then at the end he said, you are what I'm fighting for. It was the first of his letters from war. And she started writing, you're good and you're brave. What a father that you'll be someday. Make it home, make it safe. She wrote every night as she prayed. And late in December, a day she'll not forget. Oh, her tears stained the paper with every word that she read. It said, I was up on a hill, I was out there alone when the shots all rang out and bombs were exploding. That's when I saw him, he came back for me. And though he was captured, a man set me free. And that man was your son. He asked me to write to you. I told him I would, oh, I swore. It was the last of her letters from war. And she prayed he was living and kept on believing and wrote every night just to say, you are good and you're brave. What a father that you'll be someday. Make it home, make it safe. Still she kept writing each day. And then 2 years later, autumn leaves all around. A car pulled in the driveway and she fell to the ground. And out stepped a captain where her boy used to stand. He said, Mom, I'm following orders from all of your letters, and I've come home again. He ran up to hold her and dropped all his bags on the floor, holding all of her letters more. Bring him home. Bring him home. Bring him home. Bring him
On November 9th, 1989, the Berlin Wall fell, effectively ending the Cold War. The unification of Germany that would follow would become a symbol of a new global community. And just a year later, this global spirit was called to action when Kuwait soil was invaded by Iraq. With a coalition of many nations, American forces moved into Saudi Arabia. Operation Desert Storm was the first test of what had been dubbed the Total Force Policy, which combined the strengths of reserve and National Guard units with their active duty counterparts to assemble a force of 540,000 troops. The coalition forces, of course, liberated Kuwait in a decisive victory, declaring a ceasefire just 100 hours after the ground campaign had started. Then, of course, on September 11th, 2001, at 8:46 in the morning, the first in a series of attacks was carried out by terrorists. The World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and Shanksville, Pennsylvania became more than just places. In fact, they became symbols of what some were willing to sacrifice to challenge our American way of life. We were a nation looking for direction. We looked to our leadership. We looked to our families. Of course, we looked to our friends. Our nation was, if just for a moment, tested. And we were found very strong and very resilient. Across the world, we saw people respond with a message of solidarity. Candlelight vigils, prayers, songs, banners, as if they themselves had lost something too. We knew then as now that this attack would have a cost beyond that terrible day, and it continues to be paid by the fathers, mothers, sons, daughters, brothers, and sisters who have answered the call to service for our nation. Our allies in the coalition forces joined the global war on terrorism, an international military campaign to eliminate terrorist organizations. This is a fight that continues today.
A warning to the people, the good and the evil. This is war. To the soldier, the civilian, the martyr, the victim. This is war. It's the moment of truth and the moment to lie. It's the moment to live and the moment to die. The moment to fight, the moment to fight, to fight, to fight, to fight. To the right, to the left, we will fight to the death, to the end of the earth. It's a brand new world, from the left to the first. To the right, to the left, we will fight to the death, to the end of the earth. It's a brand new world, it's a brand new world, it's a brand new world.
Show me your hand. Show me what the prosthetic device does here.
It's a. It's got that cool feature, but it's designed to. It's called the Island Pulse, and it's actually a really nice prosthetic. When I lost my hand, I thought I was gonna get a hook, and I was fine with the hook because I had lost it in an honorable way, so I didn't care. But they gave me one of these, and I was like, man, that's like a new hand. It does. I mean, it works off the same muscles. I don't have to think about trying to manipulate craziness.
Can you move individual fingers with it?
It does not have individual articulation, but it does have, when each finger meets resistance, it stops, so you have more dexterity to grab different shapes. You do have to move the thumb. They're getting programmable where you can hold different muscle sensors. So I could do a 2-finger pinch. They could do 3-finger pinch.
Can you hold weight between the fingers? I mean, can you pick up a bag and hold that?
Yeah, I mean, well, for this is more for your little tiny.
No, I mean, it's a weight bearing the whole hand though.
The whole hand. Yeah. I could probably carry about 2 gallons of milk on that. So whatever that weighs, about 12 pounds.
So you could do a 360-degree turn on it too. Is that right?
Oh yeah. Play a nasty game of mercy.
You know, today, America is in the longest continuing conflict in our history. With a resolve to see the fight through, though, the men and women who served in Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom are the front line of a country that continues to recognize that military service is one of the greatest callings that a man or woman can have in their life. And as they continue to return from battle more than half a world away, organizations such as the Wounded Warrior Project continue to care for them in a myriad of ways. we are preparing yet another generation to lead and to defend our nation. But more than this, we are fulfilling our obligation towards America's sons and daughters, taking this national trust, these cadets who call West Point their home, and molding them into leaders that an entire nation can look up to. Our mission here at West Point remains constant: to educate, train, and inspire these cadets toward becoming leaders of character and professional service to the nation as an officer in the United States Army. At this time, it is only appropriate to present one of these young leaders to you. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you the first captain and highest ranking member of the Corps of Cadets, Cadet Lindsay Danilak.
Class of 2014, I am very proud and profoundly humbled to be standing before you tonight, representing the future generations of leaders who will serve this great nation. My peers and I are moved and inspired to be given the privilege to continue the legacy of excellence, selfless service, and sacrifice that veterans established with the founding of our nation. We look towards a future that is bright and filled with opportunity, and we will continue to honor those who came before us. To all the veterans here tonight, on behalf of the entire Corps of Cadets, we thank you.
Heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than love. Sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for patriots' dreams that see beyond the years. Cities gleam, undimmed by human tears. America, America, God shed His grace on thee.
Ladies and gentlemen, this afternoon we have celebrated those who have served before us, those who know better than anyone else that hard truth that our freedom is not free. It's come at a very, very dear price. And to our veterans, we are reminded through your presence here today that we stand firmly on your shoulders, on your sacrifices, as well as those who served before you. So because it is important to us that you hear it today and every day, for your service, we say thank you.
That solitary soldier stands with many or alone. In the watch that he keeps, he knows, makes his nation freedom's home. For the ones who gave it all, and the lessons that were learned, for the best who fought in hell and all the times they came back burned. Those places far away, standing for freedom together for the USA. For the USA.
You know, as you walked today with the West Point Band, as we have remembered the sacrifices that have been borne through the conflicts of generation after generation, we hope that you have seen why we do something like this, why we have taken the time today to say thank you to our veterans. What they've endured and what they continue to do on our behalf demands that we give back to them our very best, both today and every day. And so it is only appropriate that as we close our presentation this afternoon, we do so with the songs that give life to that service. Those great songs of the Coast Guard, the Air Force, the Navy, the Marines, and of course, the United States Army. Ladies and gentlemen, we close this celebration of veterans with the Armed Forces Medley.
We're always ready for the call. We place our trust in Thee, who serve us all and how in death how shall our purpose be. Semper Paratus is our guide, our fame, our glory too. To fight, to save or fight and die, I Coast Guard, we are for you. We go into the wild blue yonder, climbing high into the sun. May the guns to beat our thunder, and the boys give her the gun, give her the gun. Down we dive, spouting our flame from under, off with one hell
Ladies and gentlemen, the United States Military Academy Band, the West Point Band. You know, if you're watching some TV tomorrow, you'll see the Hellcats on Fox and Friends. And of course, if you go to the downtown area of New York City, you'll see, as the superintendent mentioned, we'll be marching up Fifth Avenue. So check that out too. And then next week, we're still telling the story of veterans. Next week on Sunday at the Giants football game at MetLife Stadium. And then make sure that you're back here at iCall on the 6th and the 7th. We have our annual holiday show. On the 8th, we're here on this stage with the Boston Pops. That following week, on the 14th, we have the Army-Navy game. Go Army! Good luck to the Navy, just not as much as the Army. And of course, on Christmas Day, the Fox News Channel will broadcast a 1-hour special, a holiday special again, an updated thing to put on your calendars. So, you know, the reason we tell this story is about only 1% of America serves today. And it's to the 99% that all of you, all of us, have to be telling that story, because veterans have earned that privilege. I want to make sure that we end this concert right with the National March of the United States, Stars and Stripes Forever. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.